Okay guys, so this is section 14.8, video 2, about additional examples. Those examples which you're going to see, I'm not going to put them on a test, however you may see them on your homework. So I want to go over 3 examples. Example 1, this is about the rectangle. The length of rectangle is 5 more than the width the area is 36 square feet. Find the length and width. Okay, so let's talk about solution. So we have a rectangle, and like you see in this problem, they comparing the length to the width. So width, I'm going to label with x. X is the width. So the length of the rectangle, it's 5 more than width. So you don't want to introduce extra variable, just use the information that the length it's 5 more than width, which means x plus 5, and that's going to be length. So we have it, x is the width, length is x plus 5. Now what will be your equation? Your equation will be the information about the area. The area of the rectangle is 36. So area of rectangle, it's equal 36 square feet. So the formula for area is length times width. It's equal 36 square feet. In our case, length is just x plus 5 times width. Let me just put that so it's not extra. Width, it's x equal 36. So you need to solve this equation. So everything what you're solving in chapter 14, it's quadratic. So what you will need to do, you will need to distribute first. You will need to multiply x by x and 5 by x. So x times x is x squared. 5 times x will give you 5x equal 36. So quadratic equation, you always want to have a 0 on the right side. So you will need to subtract 36 from both sides. And we're getting x squared plus 5x minus 36 equals 0. So now we're ready to solve it. So to solve it, use factoring method. To solve it. So I'm going to factor using AC method. A it's equal 1, B it's equal 5, C it's equal negative 36. We multiply factoring method. I'll put AC because that's the one which we use in this class. So A times C, it's equal 1 times negative 36, which will give you negative 36. Find two integers, which by multiplication will give you negative 36. The same two integers, which by addition gives you B. In our case, B is equal 5. So what's going to work? 9 and negative 4. Okay, since the product is negative, one of them integer has to be negative. So now since A is equal 1, so in this case, you're just going to create two parentheses, x plus your first integer, which is 9, times x plus your second integer, which is -4, equals 0. You don't need to worry about factoring GCF. There is no GCF in each parenthesis since a is equal 1. Since a is equal 1, there is no GCF, or you can just say the GCF is equal 1 in each parenthesis. So we don't need to do that step, parenthesis, when you have to factor GCF and ignore it. Okay, so now what we're going to do, when you have two factors, next what you need to do, you need to solve two equations. X plus 9 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. Solve both of them. So we're getting x is equal -9. Here we're adding 4. We're getting x equal 4. Now, in word problems, you guys need to check if your solution makes sense. So don't forget, let's go back, that x, it's a width. Okay, we're talking about the width of the rectangle. So this negative solution doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense in our problem because width can't be negative. So we're just going to ignore it. So x equal 4 makes sense. That means x is equal 4 feet. That's the width of rectangle. That definitely makes sense. And when you find the width, don't forget that in the problem they all ask you to find the length and width. So to find the length, you need to add 5 to x. So length was x plus 5. So in our case, it's 4 plus 5, which is 9 feet. That's the length. So here we go. We have the dimensions of the rectangle. 4 feet is the width, 9 feet is the length. Okay, so that's one of the examples which I want to go over. If you need more practice, you can read example 2 from your textbook on page 874. Very similar example to the one which I went over. Okay. Next one, I want to talk about example 2. Okay, so application of quadratic equations. So while we're learning quadratic equations, so we can solve problems like this. So let me give you example 2. We're talking about object. So we have an object launched into the air from the ground. And its height is given by equation. I would say this is classic equation, classic problem for quadratic equation. And the equation which they give you for height is -16t squared plus 144t. Okay, so that's the equation where h is the height, in feet, and t equal time in seconds. So what they asking you to do, they asking you to find the time require the object to hit the ground. Okay, so let's talk about the answer solution. For this problem, to be honest, you don't need a picture, but here we have a ground. We have an object, okay, and the object is launched into the air. So it's launched into the air from the ground, and then it goes up and eventually it will hit the ground. Okay, so height, h represents the height of the object based on the time in seconds. So we need to find the time required for object to hit the ground. So a couple things. Note, h is equal 0. Okay, so height of the object when hits the ground. Of course, when we hit the ground, that's it, the height is 0. So we need to figure out after how many seconds this object will hit the ground. Okay, so again, this is just ground. So what you're going to do, take the given equation and solve it for t. Make h equal 0. So going back to note, so that's the first note. Second, use the given equation. Make h equal 0 and solve for t. And solve quadratic equation. For t. Okay, so we're going to do it. The given equation is we have negative 16t squared plus 144t is equal 0. So this is nice equation to solve. What I will do first, just to make it simple, you can always divide both sides by negative 16. So I'm dividing each by negative 16. And you can always do that as long you're dividing each. So that will give us t squared. 144 divided by negative 16 will give you negative 9t, and 0 divided by negative 16 is just 0. So now, in this case, this is quadratic equation where c is equal 0. So the best way to solve it, factor out GCF. Note, since c is equal 0. So GCF, in this case, it's t. So we're going to factor t out. So we'll end up with t squared. Here, t squared divided by t will give you t. So that t goes right here in the parenthesis. And you're taking the original, negative 9t, divided by GCF, which is t. You end up with negative 9. And that goes right here. And of course, don't forget that that has to be equal 0. So let me rewrite that. You have t times t minus 9 equals 0. So now when you have two factors, you can use zero product rule. which means solve two equations, t equals 0 and t minus 9 equals 0. So let's talk about the first one. Time is equals 0. This one doesn't make sense. Does not make sense in our problem. So ignore it. Ignore that solution. There's no way that time can be equal 0, because then we won't be able to even throw that object up to there. So t equals 0, definitely not solution. So be careful. Be used to that. Sometimes when you're solving quadratic equation, one of the solution doesn't make sense, and we just need to ignore it. So let's solve the second equation. We're going to add 9 to both sides, and we end up with t equal 9, which means t equal 9 seconds. This one definitely makes sense. Again, after 9 seconds of throwing the object into the air, it should hit the ground again. Okay, so that definitely makes sense. So the answer, time is 9 seconds. Okay, so that's your final solution. Okay, and next, so I went over two solutions. I want to solve one extra example. So that's the last example with quadratic equations. So this is example 3. Okay, you have a 5. Oops, what just happened? We're recording. Okay, I will sign in later. Let's just continue. Example 3. 5-yard ladder leans against a wall. The distance from the bottom of the wall to the top of the ladder is 1 yard more than the distance from the bottom of the wall. To the bottom of the ladder. Find both distance. Okay, so a lot of information, but what is good about this problem that actually I took that as a from your textbook. We have a house, okay, right here, and you have a ladder. Okay, the ladder is 5 yard long. Here, this is the wall of the house. This is the ground, so you definitely have 90 degree over there, which is like you guys see, we have a right triangle, so we definitely will work with Pythagorean theory. Okay, and what they mention that x In this case, it's going to be the distance from the bottom of the ladder right here, okay, to the house. And they mention in this case right here, the bottom of the wall to the top of the ladder is 1 yard more than the distance from the bottom of the wall to the bottom of the ladder. So since I'm comparing this distance right here to the bottom of the ladder to the bottom of the house, so that's why this is your x, and this one is x plus 1. I just want to tell you guys that my picture is not in a scale, okay, but this is x plus 1. So how you going to solve it? Solution. You need to use Pythagorean theory. You see right triangle, that means use Pythagorean theorem. So Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared is equal c squared. Okay, in our case, a it's the x, b it's x plus 1, c it's equal 5. Okay, so we having x squared plus b, which is the second leg, which will be x plus 1 square, it's equal c square, which is 5 square. Okay, you need to solve it for x. So what you're going to do, you will need to FOIL x plus 1 times x plus 1, 5 to a second power is equal 25. So we're having x squared plus, multiply first one, x times x is x squared, x times 1 will give you x, 1 times x will give you x, and 1 times 1 will give you 1, equal 25. Simplify the left side, so we're having x squared plus x squared, which will give you 2x squared, x plus x will give you 2x, plus 1 equal 25, and you're solving quadratic equation, so you always have to make 0 on the right side. So I'm subtracting 25 from both sides, and that will give you 2x squared plus 2x plus 1 minus 25, which will give you negative 24, equals 0. What I will do here, I will divide, to shrink that a little bit, divide all by 2. Since I have all even numbers, let's just divide all of them by 2. So you're having x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. And next, what you're going to do with this one, solve it by factoring. Factor using AC method. And this is a nice case because a is equal 1. So you don't need to worry about finding GCF. So a is equal 1, b is equal 1, c is equal negative 12. So a times c, 1 times negative 12 will give you negative 12. We need to find two integers, which by multiplication will give you negative 12, which is AC. And the same two integers by addition has to give you b. b in our case it's equal 1. So we have, let's see what's going to work. 4 and negative 3. 4 times negative 3 it's negative 12. 4 plus 3 will give you 1. So when you have them, since a is equal 1, this is the easy case. You will have x plus the first integer, which is 4, times x plus second integer, which is negative 3, equals 0. And next, solve two equations. X plus 4 equals 0. And we need to solve also x minus 3 equals 0. Subtracting 4, we're getting x equal negative 4. Don't forget that x represents the distance from the ladder to the house. So negative number doesn't make sense. So in word problems, when you see those negative numbers, ignore it. Okay, distance can't be negative. Okay, so the solution will come from the second equation. We're getting x equal 3 feet. Okay, so that's the distance from the ladder to the house. And next, to get the second distance, the distance from the bottom of the wall to the top of the ladder, which is right here, it's going to be x plus 1. So x plus 1, it's equal 3 plus 1, which is equal 4 feet. So this is the distance from the bottom of the wall to the top of the ladder. And that's it. That's the solution. So we got x equal 3 feet and x equal 4 feet. So two solutions. So that's it. I'm going to stop. And this is the end of section 14.8. Okay, thank you for watching. Stop recording.